Welcome to my YouTube channel. This is my first video. I am going to be talking about my cancer journey. So this is going to have to be very heavily edited. Okay, so my name is Nikki. I am 34. I'm not 34, I'm 35. Okay, my name is Nikki and I am 35. I am halfway through my chemotherapy treatment for triple negative breast cancer. So I was diagnosed in August 2017 at the age of 34. August 23rd at 9:10 in the morning, emblazoned in my memory. So my cancer journey actually goes back predating my diagnosis. So we have a genetic link for breast cancer. So my family's cancer journey actually starts with my mother's mother, so my maternal grandmother, who was diagnosed at 34 and died at 42 from what we can assume now would have been triple negative breast cancer. And it got to stage 4, metastasised in her brain, and sadly she died at 42 when my mother was 7. My mother was diagnosed at the grand old age of 57, so still very young. And at the time, I'm one of 3 girls. At the time, we questioned whether it was genetic cancer at that time, and put forward for cancer genetic testing. Sadly for me, for us, we were actually denied genetic testing at that time because my mother's cancer was postmenopausal, my grandmother's cancer was premenopausal. They were deemed to be 2 different cancers, and they thought that it was very unlikely that my mother's cancer was caused by a BRCA gene, so the breast cancer genetic mutation. And it wasn't until 4 years later, when I was diagnosed at 34, that we were put forward for genetic testing, and we have tested positive for BRCA1 gene mutation, which I will explain later. So my cancer story started in August, so kind of the end of July 2017, early August, and I thought I found a lump in my right breast. I was with my now boyfriend. We were dating at the time, and I kind of said to him, can you feel this lump? So it's a tiny little lump. Can you feel this lump? And he couldn't feel it at the time. So I kind of said to him, I told him about our family history and said that I'm a bit concerned, and he was the one that said, well, if you're concerned, go to the doctors. So the next morning I tried to find it again, couldn't find it again, and haven't actually been able to find it since. That was the one and only time that I think that I've felt that lump, so my cancer. So the next morning I was putting on deodorant in front of my mirror in my dressing table, and I found a dent on the underside of my breast, which I can only explain really as looking like someone had pressed a thumbprint into the side of it. So it kind of looked like Play-Doh when you press your thumb into it. It was concave kind of dent, and the underside of my boob was kind of misshapen. It was out of shape. So at that point I started to panic a little bit and thought, yeah, I need to go see the doctors. So I went, I called the doctors, and I only have good things to say for the NHS. They've dropped the ball a couple of times with my treatment, but on the whole, they have been bloody fantastic. So I went and I phoned my doctors that day, which was a Tuesday. Explained to the nurse, I said, I've got a family history of cancer and I found a dent, and she got me in for the next day, which was brilliant. So I went to see my doctor. Again, he was absolutely fantastic. He examined me and he couldn't find the dent, he couldn't see the dent, and he couldn't feel the lump. But because of my family history, he referred me for an emergency mammogram, which was fantastic. So a bit of a weight off my mind. So that was scheduled for 10 days later. So we went on the 10th of August, and my mum came with me, and we went in and saw my breast care surgeon, who examined me, and he was the first person to say, yeah, I can see what you mean. I can see the dent. I'm going to send you for a mammogram, and we're also going to send you for an ultrasound. So that was the first point that I thought, oh, well, it's not me imagining it, but at least we'll get it sorted. So I didn't actually for a second think anything was going to kind of come of it. And so I went through, got undressed into these delightful gowns that they put you in, waiting with other ladies for a mammogram. Clearly the youngest there, which I'm quite used to now. That's kind of just part and parcel of being a young cancer patient, unfortunately. Youngest there by about 20 years at least, out of about 5 women. So went and saw the ultrasound technician first, who I've seen about 2 or 3 times since, who's always been very lovely. And she did an ultrasound and she found I can't remember what she called it, a mass, I think it was what she called it. So she said, I found a mass, it's right at the back by your chest wall. So she said, I'm very surprised that you found this. And I explained, well, I found it through a dent. And she said, oh, well, that would explain it, because she said she didn't think, well, she couldn't feel it to start with. So at that point she said, well, we're going to need to biopsy this. So that was the first point that I kind of thought things were amiss, that there might be something a bit more sinister. She said, well, you're going to need to go for a mammogram first, and then come back and I will do a core needle biopsy. So I went off and had my mammogram, and now the problem is, at that point, pre-chemo, I put on a 1.5 stone since chemo, and steroids, so my boobs were a lot bigger than they were. So back last August, I was a lot smaller up top, and it was very difficult. If anybody has been through a mammogram with small breasts, they'll know it's easier for large breasted women, because they have to. So mammogram, they flatten your boob this way, so it's almost flat. So it's quite strange seeing your own breast in 2D. They flatten it this way, and then they flatten it this way, which isn't the most comfortable thing. So I'm glad they did that before they did the core needle biopsy. That's all I'm saying. So they flattened it, and they really had to try hard, because the mass that they found was, and still is, right at the back by the muscle, by the chest wall. They couldn't actually get the angle for the mammogram to take a decent picture. And being young as well, there's issues with young breast tissue. It's a lot denser than older ladies. So actually tumours don't tend to show up on mammograms, which is why they don't routinely screen you through mammogram when you are under 50. And actually nothing showed up on the mammogram. It came back clear. So if they've just done a mammogram, I probably would have still been blissfully unaware now. And I've seen the mammogram since, and you can't tell, even when you know exactly where it is, you can't tell. So I then went back, they brought my mum into the waiting room, and that was the first point that I kind of saw her looking a little bit panicky, because my mum's panicked, she kind of talks quite a lot. And she has been through this, so hers was picked up on a mammogram 4 years ago. and she'd had a core needle biopsy, so she was familiar with this process. But I can remember thinking, well, my mum's kind of panicked about this and she wasn't expecting it, because she was sort of trying to comfort me by talking a lot, bless her. So the nurse explained the procedure to me, and what they do in a core needle biopsy is they get a rather large needle, which is hollow on the inside, and they insert it into the tumour or the mass or whatever they need to biopsy, and it takes a cylindrical portion of what they need to biopsy, and it makes a really loud, like, clicking noise, a bit like a staple gun. It's quite disconcerting when you're having it done. So she warned me about this. She said it's quite a loud. So we sat in the room. So we sat in the hospital room, and my doctor came in with a lady and said, "This is Caroline, one of our breast care nurses." So I can remember sitting there thinking, well, why would I need a breast care nurse? So that was kind of the light bulb, oh crap moment, where I kind of realised then. And my doctor, I can remember he sort of stood next to the sink, and I had the breast care nurse stood by the door. Mum and Dad were by the door. I felt a bit sorry for Mum and Dad because I think they sat there. I think they felt quite far away from me, which I think when you're expecting good news is fine, but when it suddenly turns into bad news, that distance can be quite a bit of a challenge. So my doctor kind of looked at me, and weirdly enough, he kind of recounted kind of what had happened. So he took his time doing that. He kind of said, "So, Nicola, I met you last week, and you presented with a dent in your breast." He told me all, you've been for a mammogram, you've been for ultrasound. And I remember thinking, yeah, I know exactly what I've been through, so just spit it out. Just tell me that it's not cancer, and we can all go home, and we can all be fine and put it behind us. And then he said, unfortunately, and that's when I kind of thought, oh, crap. And he said, we did find cancer cells in the mass. And then it's completely true what they say. It's just a boo. There's nothing goes in after that. It's just kind of a silence. And I can remember the words chemotherapy. I can remember lumpectomy. I can remember radiotherapy. I can remember little things, like I can remember how his tie was tucked in to his shirt. I can remember being like obsessed, like not obsessed, but preoccupied with looking like I was listening, like and kind of nodding, and then just thinking, oh God, you know, I've got cancer, so. And then he kind of said, right, I'm going to give you a moment, and they left the room, and my mum and dad, and we were crying, and they gave me a big hug, and they just kind of said, look, we're going to get through this together. And it was the first and I think only time I've seen my dad cry, so that was kind of, well, that was really heartbreaking, to be honest. And even my mum, I don't think I've really ever seen my mum cry, so seeing my poor mum cry and knowing everything that she's been through, you know, she's watched her mum die and then had it herself, and now my poor mum's got to watch her kid go through it, and it's just, that was really a bit heartbreaking. So, and then we kind of rallied and we said, right, well, we've got to kind of figure out what we're going to do. So the doctor came back in and we sort of signed things. We had to sign them, I can't remember what you call them, confirmation sheets and consent sheets. We had to sign consent sheets. And the breast care nurse kind of talked us through it. So my doctor left and said, look, you know, I'll refer you to oncology, and you'll need to, what did he say? You need to decide whether you want surgery first or whether you want to have chemotherapy first. If you're going for genetic testing, which they were putting me forward for, because I think at that point when they were suspicious, they only had two of the results back. They knew it was ER negative. They knew it was estrogen negative and progesterone negative. and they didn't know about the HER2 results, so they were still waiting for that, but they were suspicious that it was going to come out as what's known as triple negative breast cancer. So because of that, because I was young, because it's triple negative, those are triggers for genetic cancers, because a lot of BRCA1 cancers are triple negative. So I opted to go for neoadjuvant chemotherapy, which is before surgery. So I had to sign consent forms for that, and that had to get underway. So that was the 23rd of August, and I was actually leaving my job, and I was starting a new job on the 1st of September. And I'd been at my old job for 14 years. And in my new job, I got 5 days sick pay. And in my old job that I was leaving, I was entitled to 6 months full pay and 6 months half pay, being a council employee. Talk about timing. Good timing, as it turned out. So we came out of the appointment a little bit shell-shocked. Mum and Dad were obviously very upset. I just wanted to kind of get home, and I was thinking about all the people I had to phone. I had to phone my son's father, so I told him, so he was massively shocked. I then had to phone my old boss, because when I'd left work the week before, because that was it, I was finished, I was working out my annual leave, he kind of said, look, you need to let me know about the results. So I phoned him and I said, look, you know, I've had a cancer diagnosis, we don't know what stage it is, so yeah. And he turned around and he said, well, you can retract your notice, come back to the company, and we will support you through this. So that was a massive weight off my mind straight away. So I knew that I was going to go back for 2 weeks, and then I would finish before chemotherapy, and that was it. I would stay off. So that was a huge weight off my mind, financially, emotionally, and I cannot thank my boss enough for being that supportive figure. So that was a big weight off my mind. So chemo started 4 weeks later. So I had 4 weeks of, I had to decide if I wanted fertility treatment, so I decided not to have fertility treatment in the end, which I think was the best decision for me. And chemo started September 19th. So I have had I've had treatment called FEC-T, which is a common breast cancer treatment. So I had 3 rounds of FEC, which stands for 3 different drugs, and I will do a video about the different chemo treatments and how they made me feel. But I had 3 rounds of FEC, and then I am having 3 rounds of T, which is called Taxotere or docetaxel. And I will say now, I have found the T much harder. So I am 2 treatments into that. I have got my last chemo next week. I am very excited to get it over and done with. And then I am booked in for surgery. So I have been offered a prophylactic double mastectomy with immediate reconstruction based on my BRCA1 status. So we found out just before Christmas that I and most likely my mum, although we're waiting for the test results for that, but it'll be very surprising if she's not. We are BRCA1 positive, so I will do a video about that as well. And the implications for that are BRCA1 status, you have a 50 to 85% chance of breast cancer. So at the moment, my cancer is small. It's it was 2 centimetres by 1 centimetre, which is kind of a medium-sized tumour. It's shrunk by 75% since chemo. So it is small enough for a lumpectomy at the moment, which means they would just cut it out. But I have a 50 to 75% chance of getting another primary breast cancer, either in my other breast or in my right breast, separate to the cancer that I've got now. And I also have a 40 to 60% chance of ovarian cancer. and increased risk of melanoma. So for me, it was a bit of a no-brainer. To have them off would be worth its weight in gold in terms of reducing my anxiety in having cancer again. So that's where we are at the moment, and I am going to do a few films about my double mastectomy that's coming up, and my reconstruction and my recovery from that. I'm going to do a video about my last chemotherapy treatment, and also kind of my take on cancer and how I've tried to make it as positive and fun, I think is the wrong word. But it's not the negative experience I think that everybody thinks it is, and a lot of it is about mindset. So I'm going to do some videos about how I've tried to keep myself up and upbeat throughout my treatment. So if you've liked this video, feel free to hit subscribe and like and tell your friends about it. And like I said, I will see you in future videos. So bye.